Thank you, Jonathan. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. When I was told that I had only 7 minutes, I said, geez, for politicians, 7 minutes, I wouldn't even get out of first gear. So I'm going to give you some of my thoughts, but you have to understand that I'll still be in first gear. I guess I've been asked to speak here to speak to you about Bermuda in the world economy, and we find ourselves in a situation that we Bermudians are not accustomed to. As Jonathan mentioned, the miracle economy that Bermuda has experienced since, quite frankly, the end of the Second World War has become the norm for us. And it certainly has not been the norm for the rest of the world, but it's become a norm for us. Now, all of a sudden, we seem to be suffering the effects that the rest of the world are experiencing. I think that when we address Bermuda's situation, a quote from a famous investor, I think many of you know I come from an investment background, and a quote from a famous investor comes to mind, and that investor is, of course, Warren Buffett, who said it's only when the tide goes out that you find out who's swimming naked. And the tide went out in 2008, and it was clear that Bermuda was swimming naked. And the growth in the rest of the world, and actually the growth in Bermuda, had covered up our lack of clothing for a long time, so many people didn't see it. The fact is that Bermuda, particularly after the turn of the millennium, our economy went into overdrive and became overheated. And people accepted that as the new norm, and it wasn't. That new norm had construction in an incredible situation in Bermuda where everything was being built all at the same time. Our roads were choked, our schools were overcrowded. We had everything going for us. The problem is we had too much going for us. And costs rose, attitudes changed, the government became complacent, or more complacent, should I say, and thought that their role was to keep new business out of Bermuda instead of inviting it in. There's a lot of talk in Bermuda about intellectual capital. Well, the government took a view that we need to keep intellectual capital out of Bermuda instead of inviting it in. And when the tide went out, all those costs, all of those attitudes, all of the government red tape that had been built in to Bermuda remained after the tide went out. So all of a sudden, Bermuda became incredibly uncompetitive. That is why we have experienced 4 years of economic contraction in a row. And I cannot stand here and give you a huge amount of hope for economic growth this year either. I'm hoping for a flat year in 2013, but I can't promise you growth. The things that we've put into place as a new government just don't work that quickly. But they are starting to work. Let me say some of the things that we are doing in the 3 minutes that I have left. Grant Gibbons and I were thinking about how are we going to do what we're going to do. One of the original, we stated the problem this way. How do we stimulate the Bermuda economy without increasing the deficit? That was the problem. We knew we had a deficit. We knew we had mounting debt. We didn't want to exacerbate that. So the budget that the government presented in March was one that tried to do stimulative activity without hugely impacting government deficit. So one of the first things that we did was we cut the license fees for foreigners to buy property in Bermuda. Now, why is that a big thing? Well, that's a big thing for some simple reasons. First of all, one of the things that has caused the Bermuda miracle, going back 150 years, has been inward investment into Bermuda, direct inward investment from overseas. That's the thing that has fueled Bermuda, that has transformed Bermuda from a fishing and farming and shipbuilding economy to a first world country. Investments from overseas, mainly from the US, but also from the UK, in the form of hotels, in the form of, and the big ones were the US bases in the 1940s. Billions of dollars were contributed to the Bermuda economy from those bases. And that is the thing that rose the standard of living, that enabled the government to put in the infrastructure that you see around today, that is a first world infrastructure. That flow of inward capital was almost stopped down to zero in the last 4 years. So our objective as a government was to open that tap again. And not only open the tap, but go after it. Aggressively go after it, to bring new capital investment into Bermuda, to raise the level of economic activity, create jobs, and promote growth.